Good to be back at National Thrive Day and back in the rhythm and being here on Thursday nights, connecting in this way. This is good stuff. So excited about this semester and this series that we get to begin now, talking about family schedules. One of the big factors in the family schedule is work, and so that's the topic for today. We'll talk about rest next week. Well, there are times when, as parents, our kids say things or do things that make you stop and say, wait a second, I think they're imitating me, right? And the other day, my son Andrew was working on his computer, and so he was just like down in the family room, and he had a laptop open, like a kid's Chromebook, and he was just like head down, typing furiously, like smacking the keys with his hands, and he can't type that fast, but he's like typing and looking intently at the screen. And I looked at him. I'm like, what is happening right now? And I realized he's being me. And it bothered me a little bit. It scared me a little bit. I mean, like many of you, my work, a lot of it takes place on my computer, and I'll bring that home and I'll pull it up in the family room and apparently look very intently at the screen and type vigorously. And I'll do that, and maybe I need to answer an email or check something right there in the family room, or often in the mornings, I'll get up early before the kids are up, and I'll have my computer open, and I'll be sitting there in my chair, and I'll be working, and they'll come down one after the other. And at some point, I'll close the computer and be with them, but it's not the second the first kid comes down the stairs. So anyway, there's these times when I'm in the family room working on my computer, and last week, I saw that happening as I observed my 10-year-old son doing that. Now, he didn't say that he was imitating me, I don't know, but I just had this moment where I realized he's learning a lot from me about what work is, about how to think about work, about when to work, how to work, what that looks like, how to talk about work, so on and so forth. And so that's a scary thought in one way, but it's also a really great thought in another way, that we get to influence our kids, not just kids, our spouse, friends, family. We get to influence people in good directions if we can work and manage our time and schedules in ways that are good and godly and appropriate. And so I want to hit that target. I want to think about that. I want to talk about that in groups tonight. What does it look like for us to be godly workers and to work in a way that pleases the Lord? So that's what we're going to do tonight and the next couple of weeks. And I think it's significant that our kids and others learn from our example without any verbal instruction in these ways. But it's even more significant and frightening when you realize that the reality that God too is watching and has a set of expectations for you in the way you manage your schedule and in the way you work. So infinitely more significant than a kid observing is God observing and holding you accountable for these things. And so that's a really alarming thought, and I want it to calibrate the way we talk about work and the way we handle it here tonight. If you're a Christian, I want you to work like a Christian. So Ephesians chapter 5:16, put this passage up on the screen for us. So look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. And that's what I want for us this series, is to talk about what does it mean to make the best use of the time. One major allotment of time for all of us goes to work. Okay, so let's talk about working like a Christian. And I've got three very straightforward points to talk about this. And what we've done in Thrive this year is we've just been hitting some of the fundamentals of the most important things that we deal with in a marriage. And so what I'm going to present to you today, it's not rocket science, it's not super complicated, it's not super deep theology. It's very straightforward biblical principles in terms of how to think about work and how to engage in work. Okay, so this is super important and super fundamental stuff. The first one, okay, it is to view work as good. view work as good. If you want to work like a Christian, you need to view that work as good. So just kind of a basic theology of work is that God created work before the fall, before sin entered the world. God tasked Adam to work in the garden and to keep it, to have dominion over the animals, to subdue them, to name the animals. And so Adam was in the garden working like the ultimate man that he was, and just taking care of business. And work was a good thing. It was part of God's good design in the garden. And then, of course, work, as with everything else, gets complicated by sin entering the world. And so work is one of the things that's directly affected by sin, because God says in the curse, he says there's going to be a lot of pain for women when they bear children, and we can have some women who testify to that. And he said for men, right, by the sweat of your brow, you're going to work, and the creation's going to work against you. It's going to be difficult for you. There's going to be weeds and thorns and thistles, and the creation is going to backfire on you and make it difficult for you to do your job every single day. So work gets complicated by the fall, but we're still expected to work nonetheless. And so people were made to work. Adam and Eve were made to work, and God directed them to do that. It's one of the ways that human beings image God. One of the ways you reflect the image of God, which is what Genesis says. He created man and woman in his image. In his image, he created them, male and female, right? One of the ways you reflect God and image God to the world is in working. God, according to the Genesis account, God worked. He worked for 6 days. He created the heavens and the earth, and it was all very good. And then on the seventh day, he rested. And then he says, man and woman, you're going to go and do the same thing. You're going to work, and then you're going to rest. One of the key ways that you operate as a human being in the image of God is working, okay? So work is good. That's just kind of an overview of the first couple of chapters of the Bible, setting up this idea of work. And I'm challenging you with this first point to view work through this lens. View work through the lens of the Bible. It's a good thing that God created, and he gave us to do as one of the ways that we live on his planet and reflect his image, okay? So work, if this is the way you view it, it's not the great enemy. It's not the big burden on your schedule that gets in the way of you having fun. It is, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's not God's punishment on you. It's God's grace in your life to give you something meaningful and purposeful to do to image him every single day. Unless you're resting. We'll talk about that next week. So if you're a Christian, I'm challenging you with this first point here to embrace your calling to work and to do it with a sense of purpose and with mission, okay? So that's the first one, pretty straightforward. The second one here, the second point, is to work to please the Lord. Again, the Bible is pretty straightforward on this as well. Work is a good thing, and if, as a Christian, the way you go about working is transformed when you become a Christian. You no longer are working for yourself or simply for a paycheck or simply for your boss. If you're a Christian, the Bible says you're now working for the Lord. Colossians 3:23, please put that up on the screen. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. Is there the second half of that? It says you are serving the Lord Christ. It's funny, it's my fault. There's more to that sentence, and it's verse 24. It's the Lord Christ that you serve. And it specifies this, that you're not just working for men, but you're working for the Lord, and it's him that you serve. And so this now affects the way you do everything. because you're going to have a boss beyond your boss, someone that you're ultimately seeking to work for, to please, to honor in the way you go about working, no matter what it is. No matter what it is, you work to please the Lord. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 3, it says, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. So this is kind of a paradigm shift for us to show up in our various work contexts, thinking about pleasing God. I don't know if that's the first thing that you think about when you engage in your work. God is watching me. I'm serving the Lord. It's all about, at the end of the day, what he thinks about how I performed and what I did. And if I gave my best, he knows. I may be able to trick my boss. I may be able to trick my clients. At the end of the day, it's God, ultimately, that we ought to be seeking to please. So that's just a fundamental way of looking at work if you're a Christian. It's different when someone's watching you, right? So my wife, Bethany, she is good at a lot of things. She's good at a ton of things. One thing that she's particularly good at is various kinds of racket sports. I got her into tennis. She all of a sudden just became really good and didn't grow up playing it, and she's just a natural, okay? So then we play pickleball, the new trend, the new fad in America, or I don't know if it's global phenomenon at this point, but she's good at pickleball, okay? So I took her out on a date last Monday. I think it was like almost a week and a half ago at this point. And we were playing one-on-one, and she was on, okay? And so then we were like, let's go to the challenge court, see if we can take the people at the challenge court. And there's like a guy who's maybe 5-10 years older than us and his dad. And I'm like, maybe we can take these guys, right? And they killed us. They absolutely destroyed us. And in fact, I'll admit this to you, the guy served, and I'm there to receive the serve, and I can hit a wiffle ball with a racket. I swung and just missed the ball. And I was like, this is not going well, okay? First serve. So anyway, why am I telling the story? One thing I want to share, though, before I get to the point, is that after they smoked us, they said, do you want to play again? And they went easier on us a second time. And so after the second game, we're talking to them on the side of the court, and the older guy was like, how old do you think I am? And I'm looking at the son, and I'm trying to not offend him, and we guessed like 65. And that would be embarrassing enough to be demolished by a 65-year-old. But he said, no, I'm 85. I mean, he could be lying, but I believe him. And so we got pounded by an 85-year-old on the pickleball court. All that to say, this is why I told the story, okay? Bethany plays a little bit different when people are watching. She turns it on a little bit. And so when there's spectators, there's people observing, that's when she's on her A game. And I think if you can leverage a little bit of that mindset in your workplace to think, maybe I'm in this little space and no one else can see me, that if we can bring this mentality that I'm working for the Lord, he's watching me, ultimately I want to work in a way that's pleasing to him, then I think then we're hitting that target of what a Christian ought to do in the workplace, okay? That's the second one. The third one is something I really want to stress here tonight for all of us in this stage of life, okay? Work in your home, okay? Work in your home for point number 3. The passage that I just had up on the screen, it does not say that you need to serve the Lord in your job. It says that you need to serve the Lord in your work. And I think there's a difference there. Because I think there's an important distinction between the concept of a job and the concept of work. okay? A job is a context in which you work. It's a place or a role or a position in where you engage in work. Work is the activity of spending effort, energy, blood, sweat, tears, like toil, right? It's the idea of the activity that you do at your job. So your job and work are not exactly the same things. You work in your job, but it's very important to acknowledge that you also work in other contexts too. And you have a responsibility to work in several contexts, not just your job. And it would be a problem if you only thought of your job as the context for your work or your best work or all of your energy and effort and time. You need to reserve some time, effort, and energy so that you can work in other contexts that God has entrusted you with, that God has assigned you to. And by virtue of you being in this room, I know that God has assigned you a spouse. He's given you a family. And that means you have another major area of responsibility in which you need to work. It's not a job that necessarily is going to pay you. In fact, you might get a lot of pushback in this workplace. You might get a lot of complaining. You might get a lot of diapers. You might get a lot of things that that are far from a paycheck. But in the context of your home, there's a lot of good work for you to do. And I'm suggesting to you that it'd be a big problem if you spent all of your time, effort, and energy in your job and you didn't have anything left in the tank when you got home. Or perhaps your job is now taking place in your home and there's more of this happening post-COVID than ever before, right? Where the lines are a little more blurred. Maybe your primary job is your home. I'm suggesting to you that this is a really important and high-value context for you to work. What a privilege that you've been entrusted with a spouse. What a privilege if you have kids that you now have a context for your energy to be directed, for you to work and to care for other people in this way. We have to bring our A game and some energy and time into the context of our home because this is a major, major area of responsibility that God has given us. So let's bring that work ethic into our home, serve our spouse, care for them, foster the relationship. There's work to do there. And you know what? It's post-fall work. So it's difficult. There's thorns and thistles. There's challenges. Kids are difficult. Marriage is difficult, right? We have our work cut out for us in our home work context. It's not all going to go easy. It's not all going to be seamless. So we need to overcome those obstacles. We need to problem solve, and that requires time, effort, and energy. We got to have some of that for our house, our home, our family. When I evaluate my kids' school grades, I got my 10-year-old who's vigorously typing on the computer, right? Let's say I get a report card from him that includes math, science, English, and art. And he's getting an A in math, and he's getting F's in all the others. Of course, they don't use A's and F's anymore because that will hurt people's feelings. They use numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is really confusing. But let's say he's getting a 4 in math and then 1s in all the others. And I think that's a problem. It's like, why is it that you're doing so good in this one and not doing well in the other areas? You need to take some of the time, effort, and energy that you're putting toward math and disperse that toward these other ones. And maybe the math grade goes down a little bit so that you can give adequate time to the other things. I think everyone in the room has multiple areas of responsibility, and I'm suggesting to you that the family is one of those things, and it needs some time, it needs some effort, and it needs some energy. And you've got to bring that. And as I said, this is a huge privilege and a huge joy. What a special relationship that we have in a marriage. It's the most intimate, best human relationship in the world. God made it. It's special. It's different from any other relationship. The relationship between parent and child. What a blessing. What an amazing thing that God created and gives to some of us, right? Let's do a good job with that assignment. Let's work hard in that area as well as our job and other contexts as well. We could add other things to the list, but for right now, I'm just gonna stress working in that home context, okay? Now, I didn't say a whole lot about like dispersing your time, managing your time, which maybe that's where you thought this was going based on the title of the series. But what I've suggested today is that this idea of work is a very kind of wide net. There's a lot that's included in work if it's whatever you do, do it heartily unto the Lord and not to men. That kind of includes everything minus the other major category we're going to talk about next week, which is rest. So when it comes to time management, I'm challenging you to take this chunk of time that you're spending on work, everything minus rest, and do it all to the glory of God, heartily unto the Lord, to the best of your ability, and applying your time, effort, and energy within that context in the ways that are necessary. So we'll talk about managing time a little bit more in the third session, but that's just a little bit on that now. Next week is rest, okay? Sound good? We got some good questions for you to go and talk about, and so I hope you have really good discussions.